Hello everybody and welcome in this new episode of Sartorial Talks. Today I'm going to answer to a request that we received a lot when we did our series on my personal wardrobe. I would like to share before a few stories with you because my love story with shoes is this didn't start yesterday. Unfortunately for my bank account, it didn't start yesterday. It started a long time ago. Actually, some of you who are following us since a long time may know, who have been read one of my books, you may know that my grandfather was a cordwainer, a cobbler, a shoemaker. And so I remember when I was a really young boy, around 5, 6 years old, I remember seeing my grandfather at night in his courtyard, walking on high boots, and I was mesmerized because my grandfather was working on high boots for the... In France, we have a French cavalry institution, which is a very high-level military institution called le Cadre Noir. And Le Cadre Noir is in Saumur, in the, I would say, center-west of France. And this is where the highest level equestrian people, which are in the army, were training. And each equestrian, each person who were riding horses as military had the right to have one pair of bespoke boots. I'm talking about high boots, and you know that high boots are extremely difficult to craft. It's an object that is not only an object, an utilitarian object, but it's extremely difficult because you have to shape the whole leg to the measurement of the military. So this is what my grandfather was doing, and I remember being in contact and being mesmerized very early in my life with the leather, with the smell of the leather, with the wax, with the shine. All this was mesmerizing for a young boy like me, and I believe it may have influenced my passion later that I developed, I would say almost my obsession that I developed for beautiful shoes. And then a little bit later, when I was, I would say 8, 9 years old, I remember I had an obsession that will make my family laugh. They still laugh, 3 generations actually, after they still laugh about that. This is a story. You know, in France we say this is a family story. This is a kind of a secret that you have in a family and that makes everybody laugh, but it stays inside the family. But well, for once, it's such a long time ago, I can share it with you. When I was young, my mom would take me to buy some new shoes, well, every once in a while, and when I needed it actually. And I remember very clearly that I would refuse each time to wear my new shoes immediately outside. Why? Because I didn't want to spoil the soles. You understand, for me, I was 8 years old, 9 years old, I was so much in love with my... You know, new shoes, they smell good. They're beautiful, they're immaculate. And so I didn't want, for me, the sole was not to go outside in the street, it was part of this marvelous leather object I had in my hand. And I can even confess sometimes that I was even sleeping with my new shoes because I loved it so much. It was mesmerizing me. I was trying to understand how the sole was attached to the upper and everything. So same thing. Maybe my grandfather has been instrumental in developing this passion in me, but I remember that my whole family is still laughing with that Hugo is the only guy who's sleeping with his shoes when they are new. I can confess also that today it's still difficult for me to do the maiden voyage for my new shoes each time I have a new pair, because I got a problem with the fact that the soles will be damaged, which is not really a problem, but this is my little obsession. So fast forward now to the mid-1980s, I'm a little bit more than 20 years old. I started to buy a few pair of shoes, I mean real pair of shoes. I remember, with the Jinko, which is a kind of a casual boot by Echung, a beautiful French company who was making some extremely sturdy, basically indestructible shoes. And the Jinko is a fantastic outdoor boot that I've been wearing a long time. And also I remember buying shoes from a fantastic shoemaker called Stéphane Aubry, who disappeared. I mean, I think it was bought by the LVMH group and even by Berluti, actually. But Stéphane Aubry was very famous back in the year, and I remember having one pair of Norwegian stitch shoes that were absolutely gorgeous. And then all of a sudden in my life, I had a revelation. It was in 1986, I guess, and I remember seeing or being face-to-face for the first time with the famous hole-cut Alessandro by Berluti. So close to the Champs-Élysées in Paris, you have a street called Rue Marbeuf, in which you have Chiffonelli, my tailor, and on the opposite side of Chiffonelli, you have this iconic store of the house of Berluti. And Berluti in the 1980s was, for me, totally unreachable. I didn't have the wallet to buy a pair of Berlutis, but I was mesmerized by this fantastic model. Berluti really bring about a revolution in the 1980s, mid-1980s, by changing. Olga Berluti did something that very few people understand today. What did she do? She didn't just invent a line of shoes, or she didn't only create something different. She bring about a small revolution in the world of men's shoes. Why? Because it was the first time back in the mid-1980s where, when you were going to Berluti, you were not going inside a normal shop of shoes shop. You were going into something that the feeling was more like a salon. And Olga Berluti had this intuition to say, okay, we're not going to sell finished pair, we're going to sell a pair of shoes, beautiful pair of shoes, of course, but to be shine or to be colored. So that was a stroke of genius, in my opinion, because when you were going to Berluti, that was the first time the shoes were extremely expensive, and not only you were paying a lot, but you were not even able to get out of the shop with your pair of shoes. And it was a kind of a cultural revolution. You had to wait. You had to pay a big amount of money for what? For waiting. But the stroke of genius of Olga Berluti on that was that people who would come back 3 weeks after, 4 weeks after, to see the color on their shoe had the impression, and it was true, that this shoe has been almost made only for them. And she had this vision. She was one of the precursors of the pioneer of the patina market, who, as you know, has become extremely big. I have a very special story with Berluti. Also in the mid-1980s, I didn't have not even 10% of the money required to invest in a pair of Berluti. But I was so mesmerized. I would go there Sunday afternoon, looking at the window. Literally, we say in France, lécher la vitrine, to lick the window. It means when you look at something very, very, with a lot of intention and with a lot of passion, you say licking the window. But why I was going there the Sunday? But it's easy to understand, because the Sunday the store was closed. So I was able to stay in front of the window for 2 hours, 3 hours if I wanted, without being, embarrassed. Because you can imagine having a guy with long hair looking at the same shoe for 2 hours could have, looked like a little bit strange to the people inside. So this is why I was spending a lot of time on the Sunday afternoon to admire Berluti. And guess what? I decided during this year that one day I'm going to wear those shoes. Believe me, I'm going to wear those shoes. And you will see that I fulfilled my dream a few years, actually 20 years later. But that's another story I'm going to tell you. So the first real pair of shoes I bought, I was able to buy in early 1990, was a pair of Derby Grafton by Church's. I was so proud to have these shoes. I was still very young. They were quite expensive for the time, but for me it was like, walking in. You will know, my friends, if you start to take this path and invest in real shoes, you will have this feeling. You feel invincible. When you have this kind of shoes on, you feel invincible. First of all, you feel you're very well equipped. You have your feet are perfectly protected. It's beautiful. Your shoes are shining. You're proud to have them. But on top of that, you have this posture. Your posture is improving, and you have more confidence in yourself. So it's not only about the shoes themselves, it's about the whole environment around the shoe, because the shoe can change your life. You understand that it's very sensitive. This is a sensitive part, and it's a part of the health of somebody to have beautiful shoes and serious shoes. And so this is why I bought these shoes. The Grafton by Church, they probably last, I would say 10 to 12 years. Can you imagine that, without resoling? And I was even able to sell them again to somebody else, because I started to bargain and to trade my shoes in order to buy higher level shoes, little by little. And when I sold my pair of Grafton shirts, I was at last able to touch the Holy Grail, which was for me, as a French person, a pair of JM Weston, and the pair was called, the model is called the Chasse. Chasse means hunting in French. So the Western Chasse, for the people who know that, it's probably one of the most iconic shoes, if not the most iconic shoe by Weston. It's extremely sturdy. It will normally, a pair of Western Chasse, if you maintain it normally, it will survive you. you will give it to your son, and if you are able to make it resold, you can have it, you know, for probably more than your life. Same thing, I had this fantastic pair, but at one moment I went into the sartorial world, I wanted something more stylish, so I also wore them probably more than 10 years, easily more than 10 years, and I was able to resell them to somebody else in order to go to the next level. And finally, in 2006, that is to say exactly 20 years after my Sunday afternoon window session at Berluti, I was able to buy the very shoe I've been admiring for so many years, the Sunday afternoon. I bought my first real sartorial pair. It was a pair of Berluti Alessandro, the model, which is a hole cut, beautiful hole cut. In the, they call it, the line is called des mesures, because mesure means made to measure. So it was a model that was previously only made bespoke, but they had a midline. It was not ready to wear, it was in between, where kind of a made to order, and it's called des mesures. Anyway, this beautiful hole cut with 3 eyelets. It's probably one of the most iconic shoes, and I really, really love those shoes. I'm not saying that I've been wearing them intensively. I still have them. They're still alive. I had to maintain them a little bit more than other shoes because, you know, Berluti is beautiful shoes. They're not extremely sturdy because they use mainly the black construction. It doesn't mean they are bad shoes, but they are black constructed, so they're a little bit more fragile than a good, you know, Goodyear stitch constructed shoe, but it's, you know, it's a Berluti. So I used to say to many people, say, don't you think Berluti is a little bit fragile? I said, well, first of all, it depends if you maintain them or not, because look, me, I still have my Berluti shoes and I maintain them. So it's for 13 years after, so it's a long life for a pair of shoes. So it's not that fragile if you maintain them properly, but Berluti is Berluti. It's like jewelry. You don't wear your jewelry every day. It's the same for Berluti. You don't walk with your Berluti if it's raining. You don't walk with your Berluti in snow. I mean, you have to take care a little bit more, but they are beautiful, incredible shoes. That was my first pair. In 2007, if some of you have been watching the series on my wardrobe, in 2007, I was able to do my first bespoke suit with Chiffonelli in Paris. And for that, I decided to go to what would become, immediately after, my favorite shoemaker of all time. I speak, of course, about Pierre Cortet. And in 2007, at the same time I was acquiring my first bespoke suit at Chiffonelli, I decided my first pair of Cortet. And this pair of Cortet was, of course, the famous, worldwide famous, beautiful, stunning pair of Arca. Arca is a 2-eyelet derby, beautiful shoe, as you can see, and which is probably, well, not probably, it's the most successful shoe from Pierre Cortet since the beginning of his company. I think it's still weight more than 30 or 40% of the turnover of the company. It's a fantastic pair of shoes, and it's depending now, the Arca, you can have it in exotic skin, you can have it in boxcalf, you can have it in suede, you can have it, it can be interpreted in many, and this shoe as the power, it's beautiful, no matter the material you use, if it's an exotic skin or something more traditional. It can be extremely casual, it can be extremely chic at the same time. This is an absolute piece of art. So my shoe number 2, so number 1 was the Berluti Alessandro, and number 2 was the Arca by Cortet. My third pair, oddly enough, has been from a name that was not very well known back in the year. That's still not very well known, actually. I don't know why this name didn't make it as a global brand, because I think they have the talent to do so. It's a Portuguese brand called Carlos Santos. I bought, remember at Marc Guyot in Paris, I bought a pair of Carlos Santos. It was made to order too, of their highest level line. I think it's called hand grade or something like that. And it was this beautiful derby V-front. So what is a derby V-front? It's a derby, as you can see, but with a V. And you know, the two sides of the lacing place forms a V, as you can see on the screen. And this is a beautiful pair of shoes that I've been wearing quite a lot too. And it's in, I asked Marc Guyot to do, if I remember well, a purple patina, because originally those shoes were absolutely not purple. So that's my pair number 2, Carlos Santos, a derby V-front. And then I go directly to my shoe number 4, 5, and 6. I developed, you know me now a little bit if you are looking at Sartorial Talk since a while, that I have some obsessions. And when I have obsession, I have to push my obsession. So I was obsessed with Corte, because I thought that this guy was designing the best shoes in the world. That was my opinion. Or at least the shoes with a strong personality. And it was matching what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was chic, that was discreet, not too much, but at the same time, something with a strong personality. And so my pair number 4 has been my first pair of Vendôme. And I say my first pair of Vendôme because that will become one of my signature shoes. The Vendôme by Corte, so the first pair was just a brown, Vendôme, which is an Oxford, as you can see, that I did on this first pair full brog with a wingtip. And this shoe has a particularity. This model Vendôme by Corte, I think I already had the opportunity to explain this many times, but I will re-explain it because it's very important to understand. The science of shoemaking, it's all about proportions. And what I like specifically with this beautiful Oxford, the Vendôme by Corte, is that the wingtip is placed a little bit very far close to the end of the shoe. And it means that if you're not very tall like me, and if you don't have massive feet, if you like me, I'm 42, European, I think it's around 8.5 UK and probably 9.5 US. So I don't have big feet. And so when you position the wingtip as at the very end of the shoe, it has the visual effect to stretch your foot and to make it appear a little bit longer than it is in reality. And what I like in this model is that the wingtip is very far, unlike some many wingtips that you can see, specifically at the English shoemaker, when the wingtip is going very high inside the shoe, that have the effect to make the shoe look a little bit smaller. And I think this is much more elegant, the way Corte has been working on the proportion of this fantastic Oxford called the Vendôme. So the first was a brown Vendôme. No, shoes number 4, but first of my series of Corte was a brown Vendôme. And then, immediately after, I decided I wanted to have a pair of black shoes. So, by the way, you understand now, I started with a dark brown Berluti, because dark brown in shoes is the most versatile. Forget the no brown in town. Forget all these rules that so-called will forbid you to wear, brown shoes in town after 6 o'clock. All this was true in the 19th century, but it's not true anymore. You can wear whatever you want. And believe me, a good pair of brown, dark brown shoes can be extremely versatile and even can be used at night if you don't have black shoes. So my shoe number 5 is also a Vendôme by Corte, but this time I wanted to have a black shoe because I needed a black shoe. My first Berluti was brown, my second, the Arca Corte, was brown, my third, the Carlos Santos, was purple, and my fourth was the Vendôme was brown also. Okay, you can play with the different levels of brown. It can be darker or lighter, more gold, but still I needed for my pair number 5 to have a pair of black shoes for more formal occasion. And that I did the same pair, the Vendôme, same model, but this time to make it more formal, I took it black, but I asked Corte to craft for me a shoe without a medallion. So you can see on the photo, it's the same model with a wingtip, but there's no medallion to make it a little bit more, in my opinion, formal. Because you know the rule. That we call the perforation brogging, it's called a brog. A shoe with a lot of perforation is called a brog, and the perforation itself are called brogging. So I didn't want, and the rule is very simple, the more you have brogging, the less the shoe is formal. The less you have brogging, the more the shoe is formal. This is why on this pair I asked Corte to craft a pair of Vendôme without medallion on the toe of the shoe. And it's a beautiful pair, as you can see, that I've been wearing a lot. And I ask also for a tiny, small detail, is that the inside of the shoe, the piping of the shoe is in a gold leaf. Well, don't worry, it's not very expensive. It's just gold leaf, it's not gold, of course, as you can imagine. But it gives a little bit of a personality to the shoe, and it makes it, if I may say, a little bit more precious and a little bit more formal. This is my pair number 5. And for my pair number 6, I stayed at Corte once again, and I decided to go for a very interesting, with a strong personality shoe. It's called the Fantomas. So Fantomas is a character of some novels in France, and it's a guy who had a mask, actually. And as you can see on the picture, the Corte Fantomas is the interpretation of Pierre Corte of the Scottish gilly. You know, this very specific way of lacing the shoe that the Scottish, they have. Normally they wear gillies with a kilt. But on the Fantomas, Corte reinterpreted the gilly lacing system, and it's a beautiful shoe that is very, very versatile. I asked my friend Paulus Bolten in Paris to give a kind of green olive patina on this shoe, a very stylish shoe and extremely versatile. That's my shoe number 6. Now we move to my pair number 7. And for this pair, I decided to jump in the big swimming pool and to do my first made-to-measure pair of shoe. That is to say, a pair of shoe I will be made according to my measurements. And I did this with a very interesting brand and a very interesting team, actually. I did it with Saint Crispin. Saint Crispin is a shoemaking operation. It has a showroom. They have a showroom in Vienna, in Austria, but the factory is in Romania. And it's a very interesting factory. Why? Because, you know, even if you ask for a made-to-order shoe, or if you asked for a ready-to-wear shoe, of course, when you visit a factory of shoes, you discover that it's an industrial process. No matter how many handmade operations are involved, it's still an industrial process. And most of the company will, when they have an order of shoes, they try to group the orders and in order to put on the construction line the same model. That is to say, it's easy to understand. In order to improve the productivity and to reduce the cost, when you have an order of a special kind of model, you try to make 6 or 7 or 10 pairs or 15 pairs in order to do it properly and to make some automation on the line. Saint Crispin in Romania is incredible because this is the only factory that I'm aware of who is crafting the shoes by the unit. That is to say, if you ask for a specific pair of shoes and you design the pair of shoes with Philippe Card, the head of Saint Crispin, very nice guy, by the way, that I salute here, you can choose everything. You can choose the material, you can choose the design, you can choose the pattern, you can choose everything, and they measure your foot. The only difference with a real bespoke shoe is that they use a preformed last. So you choose your last, the shape of your shoe, and then after that, they will measure your foot and increase or decrease the last so that it can be exactly your foot, but the last is existing. But it's basically 100% made by hand, and it's one of the rare company in the world who is crafting every pair of shoes by one by hand and 100% by hand. Beautiful shoes, as you can see, B material, green, Oxford, beautiful, nothing to say. Saint Crispin's, my pair number 7. And then for my pair number 8, I had the privilege to visit with Sonia the fantastic factory of Gazziano and Girling in Kettering, close to Northampton in England. And as you know, we have a lot of esteem for Tony Gazziano, and I decided for my pair number 8 to go to the maximum of formality, and I treated myself with a fantastic pair of from the Deco line from Gazziano and Girling. What is the Deco line? The Deco line, as the name says, is a tribute from Tony Gazziano to the Art Deco movement, which was a movement during the 20s and the 30s. And so Tony Gazziano, who is a fantastic lace maker, designed these very, very pinched waist shoes, who are reminiscent of the ambience of shoes from this era in between the two wars. And so you have these shoes that are extremely refined, specifically if you know they come from England. Normally England have a high reputation to do fantastic sturdy shoes, beautiful shoes, but very discreet and sometimes they're a little bit too classic for me. This pair of Galliano and Girling, MTO from the Deco line, is exactly what I like, with something extremely refined, extremely thin, and with all the details, and with a lot of hand operation on this pair of shoes. So beautiful shoes that you can wear. It's very formal, of course, black, cap toe, no perforation, extremely formal. I'm very happy. And that was a beautiful choice. Galliano and Girling from the Deco line is my pair number 8. Now we move to my pair number 9. It's probably the pair I've been wearing the most in my life. It's a beautiful pair of, it's a hole cut by Paolo Scafora with a Norwegian stitching, as you can see. It's beautiful, beautiful pair of shoes, extremely versatile. But the particularity of this pair is that you can see on the picture is that the stitching and the stitching of the pattern is done inside the shoe. It's what we call a reverse stitching. And it's an extremely technical gesture to do. It means that all that you see on the shoe has not been, it's not on the top of the shoe, it's been stitched inside, reverse. We call it the reverse stitching. And it creates something like extremely interesting, extremely aesthetic, and extremely beautiful. This pair is a Norwegian stitching, and it's basically immortal pair. I've been wearing these shoes, I don't know, hundreds of times in the streets of Napoli, everywhere around the world, and they never fail me. And it's a beautiful shoe. Remember that if you want to have a pair of these beautiful shoes. It's Paolo Scafora, it's in Naples, it's probably one of the shoes I've been wearing the most in my life. And believe me, I'm going to continue wearing those beautiful shoes. And we arrive at my pair number 10. That will close this first episode on my shoe collection. And it's my first pair of buckles. And I decided to go at Pierre Cortet, again, come back to my first love, and to do a pair of what they call it the Jouvette. So Jouvette, it's it's a tribute to a very famous French actor of the, I would say, the 1940s, 50s, a little bit after, called Louis Jouvet, very famous in France. And the Jouvette is a single buckle monk, which you can see on the screen. Beautiful, typically on the Cortet style, very refined, extremely immaculate pattern, but it's a beautiful shoe. And I love the buckle. Everybody is very, very fond of double buckle. This is not my favorite model. I prefer single buckle. I don't know why. It's a little bit less funky than the double buckle. It's more refined, in my opinion, and it's maybe more discreet. But of course, I adore also the double monk. But the single monk are very interesting shoes. And I don't have any advice. It's really a matter of taste. But it was extremely useful for me to have this pair of shoes. So it's closed the first 10 pairs of my collection, and I give you an appointment for the next installment of Sartorial Talks, in which I will continue the visit of my shoe collection with the next 10 pairs. Cheers.